Hi, I'm Kristin Davis, and I want to know, are you a Charlotte? You guys, Cynthia Nixon's here with us on the podcast. Are you a Charlotte? Which I think the answer is no.
I think not really.
But we'll get to that at the end.
I think not really.
Thank you, Cynthia, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
It's beyond exciting.
It is.
So, okay, what we want to do,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot, right? There's like kind of endless amounts of things to talk about, but what I want to do with you, because I have you here, and for me, once I started rewatching, which you remember, I never rewatched. Like I watched at the time, but I find it like uncomfortable. But at this point, looking back, it's not so uncomfortable for me. It's more like archaeological, or what is going on, you know? So I really, once we started the podcast, I really felt like I need to have us on to talk about the beginnings.
Right.
Because all of us had different experiences and all of us were coming from different places, you know?
Right.
And that's what's kind of so interesting about it, I think, in a way. Like we were all so different in terms of the careers we were having. And then we all came together for this and magic happened. And here we are almost 30 years later, which, you know,
Crazy.
Insane to think
Crazy.
about. So tell us a little bit about, I mean, should I intro a little? Like, you know, you were this incredible Broadway actress. I mean, I had seen Cynthia, not knowing Cynthia, in when I didn't see Hurly Burly. I saw the other one.
The Real Thing.
The Real Thing, which I love so much.
Yes,
so she
beautiful.
was in 2 Broadway plays across the street from each other at the same time. Okay.
Right.
She'd done Juliet and Shakespeare in the Park. You'd been in Amadeus. You'd been in the
I'd
movie.
worked with Robert Altman a bunch.
Yes.
And Sarah Jessica and I, of course, really knew each other.
Which was amazing.
Because we were child actors in New York.
Right. And you were in that.
We did a bunch of things together.
Right. But with Vanessa Redgrave.
We played sisters in a TV movie with Vanessa Redgrave and Jack Albertson. Yes.
Unbelievable. So when did you hear about Sex and the City? When did you get the script? What did you think?
So again, as I think you've talked a tiny bit about, so when the show first started, the premise was that we were going to really, as a launch, you know, come from her column. And the people she was writing about would be kind of like the first episode starts with the main characters, like we're not anywhere in sight, right? It's the woman she's talking about, right? This horrible thing happened to. So when I first read the script, they asked me to read for Carrie, as I think they asked you to read for Carrie.
I did not know this.
Yes, they asked me to read for Carrie, right?
And then
I did, and they were like, yeah, not so much. But I did not tend to be very proactive about these things. But for me, because I was like 31, I want to say.
Right.
And I had been acting literally for 20 years at that point.
Wow.
And a lot of success and but I was, you know, when I first started acting, I was a child and I was in school. So I was very like, I only work in New York, right? So this show in New York was like
unheard of. Totally,
right?
Yeah.
We had Cosby. I think we had Kate and Allie for a while. We
Law
had
and Order.
We had Law and Order. We used to have The Equalizer. Like we had, but you know.
But it was slim pickings.
Yes. And not all those shows were on at the same time. Those were like the things that we had. So I did call my manager and I guess she was my agent at the time.
Emily.
And I said, okay, they don't want me for Carrie. No one's really surprised here, but there's like 7 women on that show.
Yeah.
Couldn't I get one of them? Because it didn't seem like there were 4.
That's true.
It seemed because these other characters, at least in the pilot, were like central,
kind of coming and going,
and then we had all those testimony from women on the street. It seemed like a larger group of women.
That's true.
But even had there been 4, I maybe I wouldn't have been so optimistic. But I was like, can't we?
You're like, I can get one of those.
I get one of those.
Yeah.
And so they said they'd like me to come back and read for Miranda.
And is this just casting directors at this point, like Billy Hopkins, Carrie Barton?
I don't remember, but I would assume so.
Okay.
But I don't.
Like you didn't know Darren.
I didn't know Darren at all. So I went in, and at some point, maybe it was the first time I went in for Miranda after. So it was like the second audition, maybe. And my Emily said to me gently, but clearly, she said, maybe put on a little lipstick. Maybe you could comb your hair. I was like, I'll try. I'm going to try.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
So then they really liked me. I mean, it's like an endless saga. I mean, I think you said yours was like a matter of weeks. I mean, mine was months and months and months. And it wasn't like I was endlessly auditioning. I think I auditioned. They really liked me. And then I think they moved me on to like testing.
Right.
So I tested.
Right. Here in New York.
Here in New York. And I think I was one of the very early people that tested.
Yeah, yeah. Did they know that Sarah Jessica was potentially Carrie yet?
I don't remember. So I auditioned and nothing happened. My contract lapsed. So I was basically, right? I mean, it went on for months.
Wow.
And Emily would call and say, what's going on?
Yeah.
And they would say, we haven't found anyone we like better yet.
Oh, gosh. That's painful.
And I think, and I can't, it's so terrible that I can't remember this at this point, but I had auditioned, I had never, gone out to LA to test for things, but I did maybe the previous year or something, and I tested for a lot of things, and I tested for like the best friend on Ally McBeal, and I tested for a thing where I was a nun, like In the Name of the Father, and I tested for the Fargo, the woman in Fargo, which was then made many years later.
Wow.
But I didn't get any of them. And I remember Becky Ann Baker, who actually ended up playing my sister briefly in the show, said, that means you're very close. If you keep almost getting these, but you don't get it, like, don't think about like, I didn't get it. Like, you're close.
No, she's right. That's so good.
Anyway, months and months and months went by, and it was like, and every day Emily would call, and not every day, but she would call, and they would say, we still haven't found anyone we like better.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. So then there was a pilot presentation. Do you know what that is?
Yes.
Right. So a pilot presentation is not like a real pilot.
Right.
It's like they do it live. It's very
it's like a
bare bones.
It's like
right.
Yeah.
And they had some pilot presentation they were doing that shot in LA.
Oh.
There were some okay people in it. I can't remember now. And they had a part for me, and it was an okay part. It wasn't a great part. But they were like, we just want her. And if she'll just come and test, we'll just go right into production. Like there's no one else is auditioning. Right?
Okay.
So I wasn't really that interested, but I was like, it's money. And I actually did need some money at that point. So,
Sure.
So, but it was Passover week.
Okay.
And I was, my boyfriend, Danny, and I, the father of my first two kids, we were throwing a Seder for his family.
Which I've been to.
Right.
Yes.
And so it was like a big, and we'd been planning it for a while.
Right.
And so I think Passover was like on a Wednesday that year. And I was like, but I don't want to miss the Seder.
Oh.
So they let me fly out. The idea was I'm going to fly out Friday morning or Thursday night. I was going to test, and we were going to go right into the first read through, whatever.
Wow.
And I was like adamant that I wanted to do this thing. So then it was like Passover. And Emily, my manager, my agent then, like called them, I think, all day.
Oh, no.
Like every hour.
Oh, what?
And she would give them a count. She would be like, you're going to lose, because I think the next morning, maybe I got on the flight, whatever, maybe it was Thursday.
Right.
And she said, you're going to lose her in 22 hours.
Wow.
You're going to lose her in 17 hours.
Wow.
You're going to lose her in 10 hours.
Oh my gosh.
Right? Because as soon as I get on that plane,
yeah.
right, they have
You're
me under
doing a different
contract,
job.
right?
Yeah.
And at one point, she actually apparently broke down and cried on the phone with them.
Emily.
Like, what are you doing? This is the perfect person for the part.
Oh.
You love her. You've looked for months. You haven't found anybody better. Come on.
Yeah.
Pull the trigger.
Good job, Emily.
I know. And literally during the Seder at like 9:00 at night, my phone rings and Emily's like, I got it.
That's amazing. I've never heard this story.
Right. But it was literally from the time I tested. I mean, it was months.
Wow.
It was months.
Wow. I didn't know this. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And so in your like gut or your heart or whatever, did you feel connected? Like, yes, I want to do this. Like, this is amazing. Or did you just feel like,
I felt like felt like the Holy Grail. It really, I mean, we didn't know what would happen with the show, but it was so interesting and it was so clever and it was all actually about something.
Right. I felt the same way.
Right?
Yeah.
But then there was like all this sex in it, which was like,
we didn't know.
Right. But
it was so different, wasn't it?
So different. It was so different, but also weirdly for me, for people who this is the main thing they know me from. Again, I had been acting for 20 years at this point.
Wow.
And I had never played anything remotely like this. Like I was a person, for a lot of my early life, I had long blonde hair and I played a lot of, very easygoing, shy, wallflowery kind of insecure people, flower children, waifs.
Yeah.
Waifs for days.
Yeah,
Yeah. And so to play this woman, and I had been nominated for a Tony a couple of years earlier when I was doing a play called Indiscretions, which was Jude Law's New York debut.
Right.
And I was wearing a wig, and we ran for many, many months, and I got nominated for a Tony. And the guy who did my hair said, "Why don't we cut all your hair off and dye it red, just as a thing?" And it was fine because I wore a wig, so it didn't matter what my hair was like.
Right.
So I was blonde, Kim was blonde, Sarah was blonde.
Right.
We were the only non-blonde.
Right.
So they came to me and they said, "We got too many blondes. We've seen these photos of you from a few years back with this red hair. Would you dye your hair red?" So yeah. But so
that's how that happened. Yeah.
So
I never knew that either.
So in every way, it was such a departure. Such a departure.
And you love that.
And I was great. It was great.
Yeah.
But it felt like, a character that had like not a lot to do with me.
Well, and I mean, in some ways that's true.
Yeah.
And then in some ways it's not.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, people would ask me, how are you like Miranda?
Right.
And I would always say, we both feel confident about our brains, but that's kind of where it ends. Because I was in a long-term relationship.
Right. You had a kid.
I had a child.
Yeah.
I was incredibly domestic. She's
a really good cook, you guys.
I'm very domestic.
Yeah.
Like all the things that Miranda has at least at the time, had no patience for, right? Those were
she
like
wants
my
to
bread
eat her
and butter.
thing out of the garbage.
Exactly.
Right. So when you took it on, remember, I mean, you have these kind of aggressive power suits and whatnot in the beginning, what did you think?
I mean, I thought I have these really good jokes, which is great. And I have a really
funny.
Strong character, right?
Yeah.
She's I understood who she was.
Clearly. Yeah.
And I was really, poor Pat Field, who, does the clothes. I was really concerned with trying to look like one of those women would really look, which was not
Pat's,
we
really tortured Pat in the beginning.
Which was not Pat's favorite. but we reached a,
you did.
And
it's
also,
good. It's
good.
Good.
I mean, do you remember how in the very beginning, because we would have all those coffee shop scenes, right?
Yes.
And we tried so hard to make them real. And we're constantly not just eating, but reaching for things and right. And so
and
I
looking
was,
away. I'm constantly,
your nose
yes.
and, right.
Yes.
Just trying to have as much.
Yes.
So I was really kind of focused on that, have as much sort of real behavior and the clothes and the sort of the Miranda armor of the jewelry was very silver and spiky and it was like armor. It was like
definitely. I mean, I think that when I watch myself too, I mean, I think a lot of things, but one of the things I do think, because I had come from Melrose, where you had to hold still because they were going to do the super close up and just stare at the other person.
Right.
And I'm always you barely see my face for the first couple episodes or whatever, because I'm just working so hard to be present and be real. And, follow your lead and follow Sarah Jessica and Kim, and, Kim's doing her own thing. And, it's super interesting to look back on. And I do remember thinking, this is different. This is its own animal.
Right. And, I knew Sarah. Sarah and I knew each other quite well. We'd worked together a bunch of times, and we were always auditioning for the same parts and stuff when we were kids. And Kim, I knew a little bit. I'd seen her in a few things, but also I think we had auditioned for a production of Miss Julie that we both, I think she got it and ended up doing it.
Wow.
And I feel like she came to see me in something and I met her backstage. So I had some sense
I did not know this either.
Right. I had some sense of Kim. And I didn't know who you were, but I looked at the way you spelled your first name with an I, which is unusual.
Yes.
2 I's.
Yes.
And I decided you were Kristin Scott Thomas.
Wow. Well, thank you.
I was like, it must be Kristin. That must be Kristin Scott Thomas.
You must have been really disappointed.
No, I didn't really know who Kristin Scott Thomas was at that time.
British, incredibly beautiful.
I know now.
Yes. Oh my God.
Yes.
That's adorable that you thought you were going to do the pilot of Sex and the City with Kristin Scott Thomas. I mean, I wish I was Kristin Scott Thomas, you know?
I don't wish you were.
You don't?
No,
you're so sweet. Thank you, baby. Thank you, baby.
I'm Jay Shetty. My latest episode is with financial expert Scott Galloway.
If you're doing a lot of side hustles, it's very, very difficult to be great at your main hustle. The only way you're going to build real wealth and economic security is to go all in on one thing. That is greatness, focus. None of this matters. None of it means a thing if you can't have deep and meaningful relationships.
Scott is a professor of marketing at NYU Stern School of Business. He's a best-selling author.
He has earned a massive following through his lectures, podcasts, and YouTube channel.
Scott Galloway.
How do we rewire our relationship with money? Because most of us have a stressful relationship with money.
If you want to be good at money, put down the facade and start talking to people about their investments, how much money they make, what they do with their money, how they save money. What I tell young people is you can have it all. You just can't have it all at once.
Listen to On Purpose with Jay Shetty on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome. My name is Paola Pedrosa, a medium and the host of the Ghost Therapy podcast, where it's not just about connecting with deceased loved ones. It's about learning through them and their new perspective. Join me on the Ghost Therapy podcast.
Whoa, my lights in my living room just flickered.
I'm a little nervous. I'm excited, nervous. You know, I'm a very spiritual person, so I'm ready and open.
That was amazing. I feel so grateful right now. I got to speak to my great-grandmother, Abuela, and she gave me a lot of really good advice that I'm gonna have to really think about.
Wow, okay, that's crazy. Yes, that is accurate.
Listen to the Ghost Therapy podcast as part of the My Cultura podcast network, available on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Mark Seal.
And I'm Nathan King.
This is Leave the Gun, Take the Cannoli.
The 5 families did not want us to shoot that picture.
Leave the Gun, Take the Cannoli is based on my co-host Mark's best-selling book of the same title. And on this show, we call upon his years of research to help unpack the story behind The Godfather's birth from start to finish.
This is really the first interview I've done in bed.
We sift through innumerable accounts.
35 pages isn't very much.
Many of them conflicting.
That's nonsense. There were 60 pages.
And try to get to the truth of what really happened.
And they said, we're finished. This is over. The movie's not going to work. You gotta get rid of those guys. It's a disaster.
Leave the Gun, Take the Cannoli features new and archival interviews with Francis Ford Coppola, Robert Evans, James Caan, Talia Shire, and many others.
Yes, that was a real horse's head.
Listen and subscribe to Leave the Gun, Take the Cannoli on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Something about Mary Poppins?
Something about Mary Poppins. Exactly.
Oh, man. This is fun.
I'm AJ Jacobs, and I am an author and a journalist, and I tend to get obsessed with stuff. And my current obsession is puzzles. And that has given birth to my podcast, The Puzzler. Dressing.
Oh, French dressing.
Exactly.
Oh, that's good.
Now you can get your daily puzzle nuggets delivered straight to your ears.
I thought to myself, I bet I know what this is. And now I definitely know what this is.
This is so weird. This is fun. Let's try this one.
Our brand new season features special guests like Chuck Bryant, Mayim Bialik, Julie Bowen, Sam Sanders, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and lots more. Listen to The Puzzler every day on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
That's awful, and I should have seen it coming.
So do you remember the read-through?
No.
Me neither. I remember, there's a thing that I remember about you, and I guess it was at the read-through.
I just remembered some stuff.
Yeah?
I remember that we did it at the market.
Okay. Chelsea?
Chelsea Market.
Wow.
And I remember Sarah came in and she had just gotten married.
She had just gotten married.
And I and others congratulated her because she'd just gotten married.
That's
and I
true,
guess they must have been scouting around there, which is why we did it at Chelsea Market.
Oh, I don't even
so
remember
that's
that.
all I remember.
That's
I remember
amazing.
Chelsea Market, and I remember Sarah coming in having just gotten married.
That's nice. This is what I remember. You had like a notebook with your script in it because, you're very professional. And on the front of the notebook was a little baby picture of Sam.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, is that your baby? And you were like, yeah. And I was like, aren't you worried to, not be at work? Not to be at home. And you were like, no. And I was like, oh, I was just very impressed. And you were like, it'll be fine. I was like, oh my gosh, amazing. But I didn't remember the bigger picture. Sarah Winter remembers the bigger picture of the read-through, which is super interesting. Yeah. Because apparently there was a Kennedy there. Can't remember his first name. He was going to play that part.
Which part?
Her guy, Sarah Winter's guy in the beginning who ghosts her. And then I guess something happened. He got cold feet. Who knows?
Okay.
Lawford was his name. Peter
Lawford?
Lawford? Yes. I know. Super fascinating. Don't remember that.
I kind of remember that.
Okay. I had not remembered. She remembers Darren coming in and me talking to Darren because I knew him from LA. I didn't really know the rest of you. I had just seen all of you. You know what I mean? Barry, right?
Barry Jocelyn,
whose
right?
name I keep saying, I'm like, oh my God, where is Barry?
Yeah.
I mean, he was a big part of it all.
Yeah.
He was the Melfi. We didn't have Melfi yet.
We didn't have Melfi.
Oh.
And do we have Jane Rabb yet?
I think no, not in the pilot. We had the mystery woman who gave me the contract to sign where I would have been a recurring.
Right.
Who, doesn't have a fond place in my memory.
No.
I'm sure it's not her fault, but, and I don't know her name, but, did you know about that? Did I tell you about that at the time?
You told me about it. I think you did tell me about it at the time.
I think you might have been the only one. Because I really tried to keep it a secret.
Right.
Michael Patrick didn't even know.
Right. I think you did.
Isn't that amazing that
I
Michael
don't know that you
didn't
told
even
me
know?
right away, but
Right.
I think sometime during the first season you told me.
Because it really, like Michael talked really interestingly about his beginnings and how he didn't know how to write Charlotte. He was like, wow, that one, I don't know, which I understand because in the book, she's not really very, like she's
fleshed out, or
yeah, she's not fleshed out. She doesn't really make a lot of sense. She's just a little different. You don't she takes drugs and goes roller skating. Like it's weird, You're like, who is that one, And I remember, really feeling like I've got to figure her out. And there was some stress about like they wanted me to have short hair. I wanted to have long hair. Pat was trying to put me in these clothes. I was like, what are those clothes? Which was I think not uncommon for us. I mean, Sarah Jessica was in sync with Pat, but the rest of us were like, what's happening? So that was a process, obviously. But also, I think Charlotte had to be developed. And that was, luckily happened over time, but definitely was not true in the beginning. And for me, inside, I had this sense of, someone doesn't know if I'm important here. Right. I didn't know who that was.
Right.
I didn't know if it was like HBO, because we didn't really know Strauss at that point. We didn't know Carolyn.
No, we didn't know anybody.
Right. We were just like...
You knew Darren.
I knew Darren, which was great. But also Darren was, trying to create this thing. Like, do you remember one time he came down and he was like, you guys have to be funnier. And we were like...
I do kind of remember that.
And then he was like... And then the next week...
Was that a scene in Sarah Jessica's house?
I think so, when we ad-libbed.
Like
the
Chinese
one and only
food
time.
or something,
yes,
right?
Yes, in
I do kind of remember
in the first
that.
episode. And we had to ad-lib what we felt insecure about.
Right.
Do you remember
I
this?
said my neck, right?
Yes, and I said my thighs.
Yeah.
Yes, it was the only time
And
we've
Sarah,
ever...
Yeah, said her nose, right?
Yes, it was, she
and I don't
touches
remember
it.
what Kim said.
She doesn't, because Samantha's not insecure about anything. Yes. But it was like our only time they ever asked us to ad-lib.
Right.
That was the end of that.
Right.
But it was very sweet because they didn't want to write anything that would upset us, which was nice. But I remember
Right, they wouldn't want to say, "What you must feel terrible about your
Blah, blah,
blank,"
blah.
and then
Right.
we'd be like, "That's my best thing."
Totally,
what do you mean?
totally. But then I also remember a different week when he'd come down, Darren would come down, he'd be like, everyone's got to be sexier. You've got to be sexier. And I would be like, me?
How? Like what? Like how?
In
Like
what
just
way?
like this? Like
yeah,
what?
Totally. Like just low cut. I don't know. Yeah, it was bizarre. But I remember just not knowing, what our aisle was, what our goal was kind of, or who we were. But then when I look back on it, which having not watched it for, 8 million years, we're very good.
We are very good.
I mean, it's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
Like Bay of Married Pigs, everything is there.
Yeah.
Like we're
you
together.
mean in terms of our characters, you mean? Or?
Not, they're not fully fleshed out, but like the energy, the gist, we're at that scene with the pepper mill. Do you remember that scene?
I do.
It was long.
With what's his name's son? Rene Auberginois' son.
Yes.
Remy Auberginois.
Yes.
Yes.
Good memory, Sin. Impressive. You told me you didn't remember anything. That's not true. And that pepper mill had come in the right time. That was like our first real true coffee shop scene.
Really?
I mean, there's one in
pilot?
the pilot, but we're at the Chinese restaurant.
Right.
Right. Very brief.
Oh, but so only at the Chinese restaurant.
Yeah.
There was that. Where was that? Remember there was that diner?
Yes, on Long Island City.
And what episode is that?
I mean, I feel like Skipper goes there with Carrie. So someone goes there with Carrie, and I'm like,
there's a
what is he doing
There's
there?
a diner that we use that's a real diner.
Stanford. Remember the place they would like put us in the van and drive us over there?
Yeah, kind of.
And it was kind of not the cleanest. I don't want to say anything bad.
Right.
We were like, ooh.
There's very interesting tile on the walls.
Ugly would be a word.
Yeah.
Ugly would be a word. Yeah, that didn't last long. It didn't last long at all.
No.
But the other thing I think when I look back on these early episodes is, to me, New York looks so different. It looks like it's the 80s. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it's like, and the cars, and like in this particular, in the episode 20-something guys or Valley of the 20-something guys, we go to these bars.
Right.
Like downstairs, and they're just like nothing. They're just like a dark room in the basement.
Right.
It's so 80s, you know?
Right.
Super interesting to me. I don't really remember it. Like, I don't know where we are. I have no idea.
I have no memory of that. Right.
Yeah, and Charlotte doesn't really get to go very often. Like the first, you guys are in Chaos. Remember Chaos? Which I don't know if it was a real place or not.
I don't think probably
in the pilot.
It was.
Yeah, but you're there. That's when Skipper comes and you push him up against the wall. It's so good.
Right.
That's a pilot. I think it's excellent. But I'm not there. I'm with that dude up on the stairs of the Met.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Thinking I'm on like the perfect date. And then he goes and has sex with Samantha. I know. Poor Charlotte. She's a bit of a mess. So wait, let's get back to you. So we start the pilot. You did feel like it was the Holy Grail. So you had a sense that it was amazing.
Well, for me, because I was at a point like I had a kid and like I had just bought an apartment and like I needed to earn some money.
Yeah.
Like and so much so that after literally 20 years of saying, I will not audition for anything that shoots in LA, like long term or even really short,
Yeah.
I was like, get me a TV show. And it was
Wow.
like, here's a TV show here.
Wow.
That's so great.
Yeah.
So I did feel like it was the Holy Grail.
Yay.
Yeah.
And when we actually did the pilot, did you feel like, wow? Or did you feel like, oh my God?
I always thought it was all great. I just thought it was all great, I thought, how am I going to be this like, sexy person that's like going on all these, like, I never dated. I had like long-term relationships. I
remember
dated,
you saying this. Yeah.
Right?
I also remember you saying, I never had like girlfriends where we would like go around and kind of like be powerful like this.
Yeah.
Or
Right.
flirty.
Right. My girlfriends, right, we're not ever out on the prowl and we never were. We're like my friends from high school. We like hang out with the boys in our high school. You know what I mean?
Yes,
like,
I do.
It was not like we'd go and meet strangers and go to bed with them.
I know. It's super interesting to look at the beginning episodes. Like there's it's very sex positive, which is wonderful before we ever called it that, but also like an openness, everyone's not everyone, I guess Charlotte's not, but like Carrie, especially like Valley of the 20-something guys, I mean, it's very interesting.
Well, so remember there was all this stuff. I don't know if you've spoken about this yet, but there was all this stuff. There was this backlash where people were some people were like horrified.
Right.
And said, these aren't women.
Right.
Women don't act like this. Women don't talk like this. Women don't have this kind of lack of inhibition and lack of sentimental, romantic, necessity. Right? These are gay men disguised as women.
I do remember this. It was very troubling.
Right. It was very annoying. And I also remember, and I don't remember what season it was, where we had a reporter, like all four of us were talking to this person at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And the reporter said, do you think this is a feminist show? And all four of us basically almost took that person's head off. We were like, well, of course it's a feminist show. Like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, totally.
Like,
yes.
We're all feminists. It's a feminist show. What would it be if it wasn't a feminist show?
Right.
Because we're wearing lipstick and high heels?
Right.
It's not a feminist show? What's wrong with you?
Absolutely. But I do think that also reminds me of the different times, and the fact that there was no blueprint for us, and that in some ways is, I think, like this kind of magic about us coming together and HBO allowing us to find ourselves, and then also being able to do the movies, and then also being able to do And Just Like That. I mean, like, there is no blueprint. There is nothing else.
But you know what? It's really funny for me because, as I said, I started acting when I was like 11, 12. And one of the very first things that I did was this movie called Little Darlings, which is starring Tatum O'Neal and Kristin McNichol. Yeah. And then there are 6 of us who aren't those 2 people. So there are 8 young women.
Amazing.
And we're all supposed to be like mid-teens, I would say. And some of us, like me, are 12 because I'm tall. And other people are like 18, but they're playing 15. Whatever.
Right.
We're all playing
Yeah.
And it's about 2 girls who don't like each other at summer camp. And somebody starts a bet to see which one of them can lose their virginity first.
Wow.
And all the rest of us line up with one or the other, and there's lots of betting on it, and the whole camp, gets involved.
Wow.
And this was a very popular, successful movie that it's like very dear to a lot of people's hearts.
Right.
But when it came out, I remember one review that started, now here's a disgusting idea for a movie, right? Critics were horrified.
Mm.
And this was like literally 20 years later. And it was deja vu for me.
Yeah.
It was like, here are women who are talking about sex and the possibilities of sex with their female friends and then going out and assertively pursuing it.
Right.
And audiences are like, wow, cool.
Right.
And critics are like, ew.
So crazy.
But I mean, I think that's, I mean, it's a show that women and gay men have always particularly, embraced. But what we would hear again and again and again when it was first on was like, the men want to watch it too, and the girlfriends get them to watch it, or the wives get them to watch it. And then they're fascinated and they love it and they're entertained. But also then it sparks all these conversations about this semi-taboo stuff that maybe if you're dating somebody, you wouldn't talk about it because you'd be shy or something. But it's happening in the episode, so it's a perfect entree, right? Like the up the butt stuff in the
Of course. Everyone likes to say all the things that embarrass me. But yes, very good example. And also such a fun memory.
So great.
Such a great memory and such a funny, I mean, now that I look back on it, which I didn't really compute this or whatever, that's really my first storyline. Like where it's like a beginning, middle, and end, right? Like Carrie's like, and then Charlotte has a new boyfriend and we see him and I'm like, did I tell you he wants to buy a painting? And you guys are like, oh, and then we do that scene. No, then we do the scene. Then I call her, right? And she's like, oh, Charlotte, I got to run out of the house.
Right.
And I'm like, and she's like, I'll be right there.
Right.
And then we're in that big cab. Do you remember? It was like a 1970s cab.
Right.
And Allison, the director, and Maryse, who's French, the DP, who I could never say her name right. They're in the front seat. Do you remember this with the handheld?
Yeah.
They're in the front seat, like on the floor. That's how big the cab was that they could do that.
Right.
And they would like pop their heads up and give us direction as we're driving around and then pop back down. And then we added you guys. And I remember it being so fun, but also being so even just like mortified to say the words out loud that I kept messing it up. Like I couldn't
don't remember that.
say the words. Because the first time I say it, it's just Sarah Jessica with me, right? It's just Carrie with me. And I had so not said it in rehearsal. Remember how we used to run our lines all the time, which I told Michael. Michael was like, I didn't know this. I was like, wait, we were so scared that we weren't going to talk fast enough for you.
Yeah.
I mean, at least I was, right? So we were in the makeup trailer just running. Do you remember this?
Did they have us do that? Did they have us watch some like His Gal Friday or something?
I think you did, but I don't think anyone told us to. I think that was your creative, thought process.
Right.
And also, I told you I was going to tell you this. I do think this is when you started saying to me quietly, like, not my medium, not my medium. Because we'd be in some complex thing where they'd say like, and then you find the lens and then you move forward and you find the lens and you would just be like, not my medium.
Right.
And I'd be like, it is.
Hitting
it
the
is.
mark, finding the lens, continuity. These have never been my strong suits.
Well, they are now.
Well,
Number
that's
one,
very kind.
It's true. But number two, I mean, first of all, I see those early episodes. You're like spot on. I mean, you're amazing. So, some of it I think is just your own mind. But I also think it is obviously a very different experience. Doing a show is a very different experience than even just a film,
Well, it's right. It's new. It's not like one long arc. It's like every week or every 2 weeks or whatever it was.
Right.
We get a new script and new things happen.
Definitely new things happen. And also we film a lot quicker, especially back then.
Right.
Remember we would film like so many scenes in a day.
Right.
And that was partly why it was so complicated, right? Because we couldn't like stop. Like now it, and just like that, we take some time, to do the singles and whatever. But back then we were like on the go. Do you remember they used to like wheel those huge lights down the street, from one location to the other? Like it was kind of amazing to think about, like guerrilla filmmaking a little bit,
right?
And
back in the day. Such crazy hours, like
crazy hours,
never less than 15 hours, often 17, 18 hours
until the sun came up.
Yeah.
I'm Jay Shetty. My latest episode is with financial expert Scott Galloway.
If you are doing a lot of side hustles, it's very, very difficult to be great at your main hustle. The only way you're going to build real wealth and economic security is to go all in on one thing. That is greatness, focus. None of this matters. None of it means a thing if you can't have deep and meaningful relationships.
Scott is a professor of marketing at NYU Stern School of Business. He's a best-selling author.
He has earned a massive following through his lectures, podcasts, and YouTube channel.
Scott Galloway.
How do we rewire our relationship with money? Because most of us have a stressful relationship with money.
If you want to be good at money, put down the facade and start talking to people about their investments, how much money they make, what they do with their money, how they save money. What I tell young people is you can have it all. You just can't have it all at once.
Listen to On Purpose with Jay Shetty on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Mark Seal.
And I'm Nathan King.
This is Leave the Gun, Take the Cannoli.
The five families did not want us to shoot that picture.
Leave the Gun, Take the Cannoli is based on my co-host Mark's best-selling book of the same title. And on this show, we call upon his years of research to help unpack the story behind the Godfather's birth from start to finish.
This is really the first interview I've done in bed.
We sift through innumerable accounts.
35 pages isn't very much.
Many of them conflicting.
That's nonsense. There were 60 pages.
And try to get to the truth of what really happened.
And they said, we're finished. This is over. Not only is not going to work, you gotta get rid of those guys. It's a disaster.
Leave the Gun, Take the Cannoli features new and archival interviews with Francis Ford Coppola, Robert Evans, James Caan, Talia Shire, and many others.
Yes, that was a real horse's head.
Listen and subscribe to Leave the Gun, Take the Cannoli on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome. My name is Paola Pedrosa, a medium and the host of the Ghost Therapy podcast, where it's not just about connecting with deceased loved ones. It's about learning through them and their new perspective. Join me on the Ghost Therapy podcast.
Whoa, my lights in my living room just flickered.
I'm a little nervous. I'm excited, nervous. You know, I'm a very spiritual person, so I'm ready and open.
That was amazing. I feel so grateful right now. I got to speak to my great-grandmother, Abuela, and she gave me a lot of really good advice that I'm going to have to really think about.
Wow, okay. That's crazy. Yes, that is accurate.
Listen to the Ghost Therapy Podcast as part of the My Cultura Podcast Network, available on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Something about Mary Poppins?
Something about Mary Poppins. Exactly.
Oh, man, this is fun.
I'm AJ Jacobs, and I am an author and a journalist, and I tend to get obsessed with stuff. And my current obsession is puzzles. And that has given birth to my podcast, The Puzzler. Dressing.
Oh, French dressing.
Exactly.
Oh, that's good.
Now you can get your daily puzzle nuggets delivered straight to your ears.
I thought to myself, I bet I know what this is. And now I definitely know what this is.
This is so weird. This is fun. Let's try this one.
Our brand new season features special guests like Chuck Bryant, Mayim Bialik, Julie Bowen, Sam Sanders, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and lots more. Listen to The Puzzler every day on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
That's awful, and I should have seen it coming.
I talked about it a little bit, like back then we felt like we shouldn't say that. Do you remember that it was
so long?
Right. Like, because remember how
we shouldn't complain? Or
yes,
we shouldn't
complain. Yeah. Because remember how people would just come up and be like, isn't it so much fun? Like once it started to kind of, take off and we'd be like, yes. Like as we're like, fainting, as we're just so tired.
Right.
But we couldn't really say that.
Right.
We felt like we
and
couldn't
our
really
feet
say
hurting.
that.
Yes.
And our feet. I mean, I told them the story. I had the bigger size shoes for the weekend. My tennis shoes were bigger so that I could let my little swollen feet rest. Yeah, because remember how we would film till the sun rose and then start at 5 a.m. on Monday?
Yes.
So you had this tiny little window
to recover.
And you had a whole life. I didn't have
Sam was
nobody at home.
I think 8 months when we did the pilot.
Exactly. How did you do that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the pilot, what I think of is when we were getting ready, when we'd been picked up and we were getting ready to do the second episode, right? The first episode of our first season. You remember this? So we shot in Silver Cup, which is in Long Island City in Queens.
Right.
All of us were living in Manhattan.
Right.
I mean, Kristin had an apartment in Manhattan.
Right.
And they decided that we were going to take the subway to work.
Oh my God.
Do you remember that? Yes. It was like, we're not going to pick you all up.
And I was like,
you have to get here on your own.
I was like, what?
And so I think I was coming for fittings or something.
Yes.
I'm coming for fittings.
We were in the warehouses.
Right. And Long Island City at the time, this is before Google Maps.
Yeah.
Right. It is a confusing, windy place.
Oh, Lord
right?
have mercy.
And so, and my kid at that point is, I think, 15 months or something. I'm not sure how old he is.
Right.
And my father has just died. He has died of weeks before. And my father was living in Mexico.
Right.
So I don't speak Spanish. I've gone down there. My boyfriend was sick. I went down there by myself with my kid, not speaking Spanish, to try and deal with not only his death. I mean, he was cremated, so that wasn't a big deal. But, his belongings and his finance, everything, right? And so I came back. I'm coming for this fitting where Shelley, do you remember Shelley?
Yes, I do.
Shelley told me that I had to take the subway or whatever.
Oh, my God.
And so I take my kid strapped to me on the subway with all the diaper bags and whatnot.
Yes.
And I get off the train in Long Island City and I can't find it. And I'm walking around the streets and I call Shelley and I'm like, Shelley, I have my 15-month-old. My father has just died. I'm wandering around. Can someone please just pick me up? So I think they gave up on the subway idea.
I think that must have been somewhere close to me trying to also do the same thing with not a child, but just my really challenged sense
you're
of
not right.
geography.
You don't live here.
I mean, I used to live here,
Right.
but it never, it's just a challenge that I have, right? In wherever I am, it's a challenge. And there was no phones to be doing
There
this.
was no Google Maps.
Right,
There
no
was
Google
no-
Maps, nothing.
right.
And I had never in my life even heard of Long Island City. I was like, I don't understand, like, just where are we? I just don't understand.
It was like a place where you assumed a lot of like snuff films were
100%.
Like,
There was just
it was
warehouses.
like warehouses.
Anything
like,
could happen.
What's happening behind those doors?
Exactly. So I had tried to go to my fitting sometime probably like the same day or next day or whatever.
Right.
It was raining and I'm just wandering, like a little lost wet kitten, like help me, anyone. And then crying, like finally, like I think calling Shelly also like help me. I don't know. I don't even know if I'm in Long Island City. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like all of it. And then she was like, yeah, Cynthia had a problem too. I was like, maybe you guys should
Send a van.
Send a car.
Send a van.
Or remember the 16-seater that we did end up spending a lot of time in? Anyway, I do remember that. And I was like, if Cynthia had a problem, I don't feel so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then remember how we both lived on the Upper West Side?
Yes.
And they would pick
Just
us up
blocks from each other.
from each other.
Yeah.
Thank God. And they would pick us up together, which
Yes.
was really fun.
It
and
was fun.
Cynthia very kindly would run lines with me. Because remember those times when I had those big speeches?
Yes.
Like very didactic, like soapboxy, like I'm going to get married and I'm going to follow this book and I'm blah, 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 blah. So hard. And I talked to Michael a little bit about like the word perfect,
Yes.
like we had to be perfect. We still have to be perfect.
Yes.
And comedy is very precise, so I get that, but it's sometimes challenging. And Cynthia, God bless her heart, because I live by myself, right? So like you can only somewhat do so much work in your own head, to a certain extent. And then what would happen is we'd get there and I'd get nervous and I'd like just freeze up. So on the way downtown or to Silver Cup or whatever, Cynthia would run lines with me so sweetly, really saved myself so much. That was fun. And like, we were like kids. That's the other thing that cracks me up. When we watch, like, I don't know how you think about this, but like, we look like little children.
Well, yes, we're very beautiful. But also, so I have still, baby fat.
No.
Well, I mean, from my baby.
Right, but no.
also, I have literally pimples.
What?
On my chin.
Like, I don't see any pimples.
Take a look.
Oh my God.
I still have acne.
Hysterical. But
Yes.
the thing that's so funny is that I remember thinking, because I was living in LA before we filmed, right? And I remember thinking like, I got to get a job because like we don't have a lot of time here. This is back when you were 40, which I don't think you probably felt because you were very theater and theater, thank God, goes on forever. But like you had this sense of like time is ticking. You've got to like make the most of it because you're not going to last long.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is like now we look such babies. But at the time, that was part of the point of the show was that we weren't kids.
I know. That's what's so funny to me.
Right. We were like mature women. We had these careers. And we were at a point when, Charlotte or other people in previous, were like, why aren't you married?
Totally.
When are you getting married?
That's a very
Who are
real
you going to
thing.
marry?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And in the Valley of the 20-something guys, when they cut to the guys on the basketball court, which is one of the most enjoyable.
I love
know.
that.
It's finally like, for me, that's when the other people talking clicks in.
Right.
In a great way.
Right.
Because it's all these guys and they're not so horrible. Like in the pilot, every man is just like
Horrible.
awful. So finally, some of them are kind of likable. And one of them, I think it starts the basketball confessionals. And he says, the great thing about women in their 30s is they're just so grateful. And I'm like, wow, where we're going to go, the journey we're going to go on, people. Oh my God. Who would have ever thought?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And back then, I remember also feeling, because when I was auditioning, I would always just lie about my age. Like whatever age the character was, you'd pick like a year older or a year younger. And that's how old you'd say you were. At least that's what I did. That's what all my friends did in LA.
Wow.
So for me, I was like, oh, thank God we're playing women in our 30s. I can stop lying. It's so exciting, right? Like it was such a weight off my mind. And I look at us, I'm like, we're like little tiny babies.
I know.
Little tiny babies.
But I think the, how much sex we're having and going out and meeting people and going out on dates and just picking people up, right?
Yeah.
There's all that.
Yeah.
Which is different.
Yeah.
And it's not, there is really nothing to compare us to. I mean, what are you going to compare us to? Charlie's Angels? I mean, right?
Right. No, it's a stretch, man.
Right. I mean, they don't talk to each other, right?
No, they don't talk to each other, and they also don't date. I mean, I
guess they don't. They just sort of like strut around, right? But I think that's the thing, is like we're having all this sex with all these different men that we're actively pursuing,
right?
And we're talking to each other about it, right?
It's like we're together.
It's like Bechdel to the umpth degree, right?
100%, yes. And that's what was so special and amazing about it. Now, let's talk about themes. Because part of the reason I wanted to do Are You a Charlotte was because it seems like, I mean, first of all, Netflix, we're on Netflix now, which is like, we could never have imagined these things, right? And all these younger people are finding us, which is so exciting and really kind of amazing and wonderful. And the themes are still so resonant today.
Yes, totally.
And it's kind of just a testament to our writing, and to just the, it was kind of just bravery on, I guess,
well, but have you
Candace's
talked
part
about the thing about the 1 degree of separation thing? About
No.
Well, that they had this rule in the writer's room.
Oh, yeah.
That, fantastical things happen on our show. Crazy, zany, like, wow, cover your mouth, you're so shocked kind of things. Right. But that they had a rule in the writer's room that you could only make a plot line around something that had literally happened to you or someone you knew. It couldn't be like my friend's dentist's cat's brother.
Right. I heard this.
I heard one time, right, that it had to be you experienced it or someone that you could get on the phone and ask them about it in detail. Right. It happened to them. So, I mean, I do think that that's one of the reasons it really endures is like it's the stuff
grounded,
even though it's real. Yeah. Even though it's like, oh my God, can you believe what happened on the show last night? Right. But it's real, and people really, the writers really put themselves in it and located the good and bad and funny and whatever sexy things that were happening to them.
Right. So true. But when you think back on the themes, like, what do you think of in terms of like Miranda's themes, or, what stands out to you? What do you think of as your favorite themes or your favorite relationships or things like that? I know it's hard.
I mean, I think maybe this is not what you're talking about, but
anything.
I mean, like the overarching theme is obviously, we're not sitting by the phone waiting for a man to call in and ask us to marry him, right? It's like
possibly Charlotte is.
Well, possibly Charlotte, but then but
she's aggressively pursuing it. She's
aggressively pursuing it, and there's part of her that has this marriage goal in mind, but she also kind of wants to experiment and have fun.
She's certainly more experimental than you realize, for sure.
Realize.
Yes,
she really is. And I remember, of course, we did the thing. They had a thing in a magazine about who had the most.
It was the book. It was the book. Kiss and Tell in the back of the book.
But wasn't it
they
even
had all
before
the pictures.
that? Wasn't it even before
it
that?
Been,
I feel like there was a magazine article listing how many sex partners each of them had, and that Charlotte surprisingly won.
I know.
She had been to bed with more men.
But I also think that is what I love about when we think back, and I kind of was aware of this at the time, because, like, for instance, you weren't Miranda, right? So you playing Miranda, you brought different things to it. You brought kind of some friction to it. Sarah Jessica is not Carrie, and she didn't want to show her body all the time, so it created kind of a friction. Like all of us being together and being such different people created kind of an interesting friction. Charlotte wanting to get married, but also being the one who literally has the most, hookups or whatever.
Right.
It's interesting, right? Like it wasn't as much as people think that we were archetypes and whatnot, which I get, right?
Right.
It really was more complex than that. And certainly like the underlying thing, as opposed to what we were showing, I think created a depth and a frisson kind of.
Right. So I feel like in terms of Miranda, obviously she's very smart, she's very quippy, she's very cynical, she's very driven. She's all about her work and getting ahead.
Right.
And competing with men on an equal footing.
Right.
And she's
I love that.
interested in having sex, but she really has thought not at all about the idea of marriage or long-term monogamy, much less children or anything like that.
Which is what's so great, how it unfolds.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the fun thing about her has always been that she has this really tough, armored exterior, but that she has all this fragility inside, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like for me, the turning point for Miranda was, I believe it's Jenny Bick's first episode. That's one of our writers. And when she first came on board, she wrote the episode where Miranda buys her first apartment.
Such a good one.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, as a single woman, what does that mean? Is that intimidating to a man when you already own and you're not waiting for him to like buy something with him
You don't
that
need
you
him.
choose together?
Right.
And that Miranda is really determined and excited, but then it brings up all of these demons for her about, what does this mean? Buying this apartment, does this mean I'll always be alone? And
I'll die alone.
And I'll die alone, and like no one will know, and the cat will eat my face.
Oh
and,
my God.
Right.
It's so good.
It's so great. And she starts to have these panic attacks, which seem very un-Miranda.
Right.
And, and in the same way that Michael Patrick talks about with Charlotte, Charlotte is a beautiful, intelligent, warm, career person who wants to get married.
Right.
And so, Michael Patrick says at a certain point, even though it's about single women, we got to let her get married.
Right.
Because we just can't believe it. We lost, it's incredulous, right? That she wants to get married. She she's going to get married.
Right.
And then it's not going to work out. That's the point.
Right.
So, and the same with Miranda. He was like, how brittle and bitter can we make her? It's like, finally, she is going to just break. So we have to finally, I guess it's season 2, I'm not sure.
I think so.
They bring in Steve.
Right.
Somebody who is like the antidote, like the to all of the, who is happy to be the beta to her alpha. Right. And who is so into her that she doesn't doubt him. And it's just, he's sexy, but he's also just very devoted. And it's a place where she can land. That's a wonderful place to be. And it's not threatening. He's not competing with her for supremacy. And she doesn't feel like he might walk away and break her heart.
Right. Oh. And what a great character.
Great character.
I know. All right. So I could talk to Cynthia for many, many hours, as you can tell. So we're going to make this into 2 episodes. You guys, please tune in to the next one.
Are you hungry? Colleen Witt here, and Eating While Broke is back for season 4 every Thursday on the Black Effect Podcast Network. This season, we've got a legendary lineup serving up broke dishes and even better stories. On the menu, we have Tony Baker, Nick Cannon, Melissa Ford, October London, and Carrie Harper Howie turning Big Macs into big moves. Catch Eating While Broke every Thursday on the Black Effect Podcast Network, iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your favorite shows. Come hungry for season 4.
I'm Mary Kay McBrayer, host of the podcast The Greatest True Crime Stories Ever Told. This season explores women from the 19th century to now. Women who were murderers and scammers, but also women who were photojournalists, lawyers, writers, and more. This podcast tells more than just the brutal, gory details of horrific acts. I delve into the good, the bad, the difficult, and all the nuance I can find. Because these are the stories that we need to know to understand the intersection of society, justice, and the fascinating workings of the human psyche. Join me every week as I tell some of the most enthralling true crime stories about women who are not just victims, but heroes or villains, or often somewhere in between. Listen to The Greatest True Crime Stories Ever Told on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to My Legacy. I'm Martin Luther King III, and together with my wife, Andrea Waters King, and our dear friends Mark and Craig Kilberger, we explore the personal journeys that shape extraordinary lives.
Join us for heartfelt conversations with remarkable guests like David Oyelowo, Mel Robbins, Martin Sheen, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, and Billy Porter.
Listen to My Legacy on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is My Legacy.
I'm Mark Seal.
And I'm Nathan King.
This is Leave the Gun, Take the Cannoli.
The 5 families did not want us to shoot that picture.
This podcast is based on my co-host Mark Seal's best-selling book of the same title. Leave the Gun, Take the Cannoli features new and archival interviews with Francis Ford Coppola, Robert Evans, James Caan, Talia Shire, and many others.
Yes, that was a real horse's head.
Listen and subscribe to Leave the Gun, Take the Cannoli on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.